Thank you, Ty, for the introduction. I appreciate it. Yeah, as he had stated, fifth generation, moved back to the family farm. Really excited to talk a little bit today about integrating cattle into the operation and a whole bunch of opportunities that I think are ripe for the taking. Real quick, just a little bit about Grandview Beef, the company that my wife and I started 2017. We had a single animal. This year we'll harvest 115. You guys can see on your screen there, those are our routes to market. We've had a lot of fun with that and have seen a lot of wonderful things that come from it and a lot of opportunities to what I think is to better utilize our soil, better utilize our acres. I always tell people that think I'm crazy for grazing animals in the Midwest, where it is primarily corn and soybean acres. There's very few places in the world that have as high a animal unit month statistics as there are right here. We can run a pair an acre. I can run 1.5 steers an acre, which is pretty awesome, and not have to irrigate. Some great things about it. So yeah, we've been really blessed that the market has allowed us to have this growth, which is one of the reasons why we've found ourselves grazing more in the fall behind oats and also doing stockpiling, which is the point of this conversation and what we'll talk a little bit more about. The day job, Agronomy First, a Pioneer Seed Sales representative, was a great segue into that. I worked with some growers that were really just wanting to do more diversification, change things up a little bit. So I bought a tractor and a drill 2021, didn't farm an acre, had no equity into it, and have been very fortunate that we've covered just shy of 20,000 acres between hay ground, pasture ground, soybeans, cover crops, wheat, oats, and that has just continued to gain more and more traction. So that is something that has allowed us, when somebody approaches me and said, "Hey, I guess this is a good spot to segue over," and how we kind of got started grazing these acres that weren't ours, was Agronomy First and Grandview Beef. And somebody approached me that had some oat acres and said, "Hey, would you be willing to bring cattle over here and graze these acres?" And I said, "Well, yeah, what do you want for it?" And he's like, "Nothing. If you can graze it, that would be great for me, because I'm having a serious problem getting rid of the extra carbon on top of the ground after my oat harvest before my corn. I have all this leftover plant material. It's tying up my nitrogen. I love manure. I just want to see that plant material disappear and to be replaced with manure." So that first year, that's exactly what we did. It was a dry year. It was 2023. So there wasn't an abundant amount of growth. It was probably 2.5, 3 feet. So it was great quality, but not very much quantity. We had 70 animals on 114 acres for about 60 days. 2024, there was a 200-acre piece. We had 120 animals on that 200-acre piece for 100 days, and it didn't clean it up as much as I would like. And me and Ron had a good conversation about the benefits and the drawbacks of intensively rotationally grazing cover crops versus perennial seedings, which I intensively rotationally graze on perennial seedings, but haven't on cover crops for a number of different reasons. And I think that would have been a way to more well utilize those animals grazing. They would have probably done a better job of cleaning it up if we would have put more paddock wires up. But I'll get into that a little bit more later. But there was a little bit more left out there than what I would have liked. I would be amiss if I didn't speak to the crop that you're going to seed behind. I think people have done it successfully behind corn and beans. But when you're looking at the amount of feed, the animal unit months you can get, I always like to think about, well, how much labor are you going to have into making sure there's water, making sure it's fenced, so on and so forth. So for me, You know, if you can graze a cow-calf herd on corn stalks and you can put some cover crops in there in addition, and it increases the feed value, that's great. But I haven't seen a good way to apply it during the corn and soybean season where you can get some pretty serious tonnage. I think it works best behind oats, wheat, a product that, or a crop that comes off in the midsummer where you can drill the product on. I think getting it incorporated into soils is vital to get that heavy that amount of forage there, which I think really makes it worth your time, right? To take cattle over there. It's not a whole lot of fun to load them up, take them there. I want to leave my cattle somewhere for at least 45 days if I'm going to go through the work of moving them, because they will inevitably have a little bit of shrink, lose a little bit of weight from getting on that trailer, getting jostled around. So yeah, I'm big fan of oats, big fan of grazing behind those oats. So fall and winter grazing considerations. You know, I chat a little bit about it, and I think Ron's going to talk even more about it, but that manure dispersion. You know, when we graze, this is that very first year, and as you can see, there's one strip there that I can't remember if that was, we were starting to run out of some of the larger seeded stuff like sorghum, grass, and millet, or if those were maybe some weeds. I'm not entirely sure, but that gives you reference right to either side of it. There's not much left out there. I think this is, I know that this is late November. Surprisingly, might be early November, sometime in November, but you can still see there's quite a bit of green left out there. Man, our cattle have done exceptionally well that first year. I think they gained somewhere around 3 pounds a day, which is awesome for 100% grass-fed cattle for us. I mean, that is what they gain when they're on cool season alfalfa perennial pastures. So we never get better than 3 pounds a day gain, and that's what they were getting on here. So yeah, rate of gain is important to talk to, and I just think that is awesome if you can be profitable with your main crop and then follow it up with something like this. It really does work well. The soil health, you know, we always talk about putting manure on behind, use the manure as your fertilizer crop, and I think that's awesome. But I think one step in the better direction is actually having the animals out there. Obviously, your equipment cost is a lot lower as they're the ones that are harvesting the forage and depositing the manure. But on top of that, there's something to be said about the hoofs, their action of grazing and moving across the ground. I would love to get to a point where I can put more of a statistic or more of a finite number on that, what they do in particular. But from 30 years of our family doing it, it always seems like something that was grazed for 7 years and then cropped versus something that just had manure application on it. It always seems like the stuff that was grazed does a little bit better. Stockpile grazing is something that we've done in the past where we've left it stand. Something we're really excited about this year is behind one of our rye fields. We're going to harvest rye here in about 2 weeks. We're going to plant sorghum grass, and we're going to swath that after it's been completely killed off from frost. You know, we're thinking sometimes around Thanksgiving. We'll swath it, and I've done a lot of research on this and heard a lot of other people talk about it, and it sounds like it is right on par with feeding round bales in terms of utilization of the forage. So
I got Knute talking.
That is something that I'm really excited about, that stockpile grazing. Swath grazing, that goes right in what I just said. So yeah, from the things that I've seen, stockpile grazing is a touch less. You don't get quite as much feed efficiency. I think stockpile, if you leave it standing, you're around 50 to 60. Swath, I've heard up to 85, 90. I'll be able to report more on that in the future. Fencing considerations for it, grazing in the fall and the winter. I heard somebody a long time ago from Forage magazine talk about the importance of not putting any fences inside your perimeter, and I have found that to be very true. So we'll always put up a good perimeter fence, but apart from that, we won't put up any fences inside that perimeter. We like to use temporary wires. when they allow for step-in posts. Otherwise, tumble wheels work excellently. So those are my thoughts on that. The cover crop mix, I think, is a really important thing to consider when you got to think about what you're aiming for. Is it just rate of gain? Is rate of gain not quite as important? You're more worried about your soil health aspect. Application method. Again, I own a drill, so I guess you could take this with a grain of salt, but I really don't think it compares to aerial application. I think you get a much better stand. I think you get much better forage. And on top of that, if you're trying to use it for weed suppression, to cover every acre versus what you're going to get from an aerial application, and you're not getting any soil contact. So I'm a big fan of the drill. And there are some other benefits in there, and we're focusing right now on grazing, so I won't waste your guys' time on that aspect of things. But I guess from that mix side of things, I really like turnips and radishes. Those cattle love it. One thing I'd be amiss if I didn't mention was the water intake. Usually, it seems like the month of October, I fill that 500-gallon water tank that I have 150 cattle drinking out of 1 or 2 times. And I remember the first 2 years, I'm just worried sick, thinking I'm going to walk out and why aren't these cattle drinking any water? And you come to learn that those turnips and those radishes, those cattle will pull those out of the ground and they eat it. They just love them. Those are like 90% water, 90% moisture. So until it freezes hard, those animals will eat those turnips and radishes and hardly drink water. It really was something that took me a while to get used to. So really like turnips and radishes. Sorghum Sudan grass, I think, is hard to beat in terms of quality and tonnage. I will say be careful with how much of it you put out there because it is so much biomass. So if you're going to a cash crop the next year and you want it to be mowed down and not to have a bunch of plant material over there. Last year, we did 30 pounds. I think that was just a bit too much. We're going to try about 10 pounds interseeded with some other products. If you're using sorghum Sudan grass, prussic acid is obviously a concern. Be sure to plant a portion of the field to annual ryegrass or a millet with your turnips and your radishes. That will allow a spot that you can paddock off and keep them on there for that 2 or 3 week period. Where prussic acid is there in the sorghum Sudan grass plant. And then, they usually do a really nice job of mowing that paddock down, and we push them back to the sorghum Sudan grass side until usually we try to have them home around January 1st. But with swath grazing, we're hoping to get into February, March this coming year. So some other popular ones, clover is a really good one. I've heard some people have some success with. But yeah, I guess my big four would be turnips, radishes, sorghum Sudan grass, annual rye. Oats are incredible, but we never put them in the mix because we usually have 1 to 3 bushel come out the back of the combine. So when we're grazing those, it seems like the best part of it is they're 6 to 8 inches tall. They're green, they're tender, they're great quality. So yeah, that's, I would say, covers most everything about our cover crop mix, how we do what we do. This is a little bit more about perennial seeding, so I won't talk much about that since we're focusing on fall and winter. If you guys have any questions, you can reach out. I am leaving the Pioneer team, so that probably isn't the best email. You can use that Grandview Beef one. info@Grandview Beef will get you to me. So yeah, don't use that bottom email there.
All right, thank you, Knute. So for you, while we wait for people to throw some questions here, what's one thing that you wish you would have knew before you started this fall/winter grazing?
There's a long list. I would say if there was one big thing that I wish I knew before we would have started doing it, it was leave a portion of your area that you're going to graze that you can graze through the frost. Like that first year, I didn't have anything to take them off on when it was sorghum Sudan grass. So, I mean, I had 3 days of labor trucking 100 some head off of it to come back to it. So, biggest recommendation would be exactly what Ron said, having a heavy use area. And luckily, after that first year, that gentleman's property that I bedded, he did have a nice concrete area, and that's what we did. We pulled him off, we kept him on that concrete, and we fed him hay for I think it was 10 days before we turned him back out. But boy, it's just so easy to just have a third or a fourth of your total acres, just leave anything out that's going to have any problems going through a frost with prussic acid or poisoning issues. And so that was a big one that first year. I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way of doing it.
All right. All right. Ron, you want to try giving, you have a night?
I agree with what Knute said there. You got to have that plan. And I don't do much Sudan grass anymore for that reason of the having to worry about that. And Pete was asking before what your goals are, and we had a field day last fall, and somebody asked me that. I said, oh, I guess I would say feed for the cattle, but I'll plant anything. And if we ever get to put all the slides in here, there's a picture of peas and triticale from last year, November 26th, and that stuff was beautiful yet. The peas and oats that I had planted, the oats was pretty well gone. So that really had held in there. So sometimes you learn by your mistakes. So one of the other things is if you don't have a dealer that wants to work with you for doing a lot of this stuff, get a different one. There's dealers out there, there's co-ops out there that love to do this stuff. I've heard a lot of people say, well, my guy doesn't want to do that. Find a different one. They'll come around because they're going to have to eventually.
Well said, Ron.
All right. I guess another one here. How do you determine the value of the ground that you are grazing that belongs to like neighbors? So how do you determine like value for like if you're renting ground and everything? Do you just go based off the land value, or do you add something to it, or how do you guys negotiate that?
And to be honest, I haven't paid for anything yet because there's a lot of labor in the fencing. And then I say haven't paid anything, but I come in with my drill. I buy the seed. I put the seed down. I do the labor. I do the fencing. You know, that person who owns that didn't have to do a darn thing. And they'll usually end up with some kind of money because of the cover crop incentive if you're in a watershed, or, you know, just something that is statewide. You know, usually there's like 10 to 15 bucks for no-tiller cover crop. So this year I'm going to have enough acres. I'm going to have somebody else bring their cows over. I'm going to charge them $1 a day to graze.
We have not done that at all on other people's land, but I keep saying that to do a good job, they should be paying you because you're going to bump their yield next year. When you get out there in their combine next year and see that yield monitor and the bump, they'll be wanting you back. If you don't have that plan for inclement weather and you destroy their field, neither you nor anybody else is ever going to get back on that land. And so I've tried to do this in our watershed groups to get a program going where we would pay the row crop farm or something, and the producer would get free feed. We haven't got that done yet. I should say the producer with the animals would get free feed, basically. But that's how you get people going and grazing. It's easy to put a fence around a row crop field. Not committed to forever. Like, I mean, we converted back in 2006, we converted 50 acres at home row crop land into rotational grazing. Very hard to get someone to do that. You get them out there on the row crop field, throw a little fence around, a big deal. You see the yield bump. Pretty soon, maybe, hey, we got some marginal land over here. Maybe we should be grazing that in the summer. You know, having our animals on our row crop fields in the winter. So we haven't paid anybody. Luckily have enough base acres to do that on our own.
My last thing on that would be, if they're really wanting something, approach them and say, work with me here. I fence it the first year. The second year, I'll do the planting and buying the seed. And then year 3, if it's working well, I'll pay you what, $10, $15 an acre, you know, come up with something that's good for you because you're the one that's doing all the labor. But if they're not willing to work with you those first 1 or 2 years, as you have to put the fence up and do the labor, I would keep looking personally.
So kind of like how it is with this renting land. This is all, everything's different. It's all negotiation and everything. So I guess another thing here is kind of what was your the biggest mistake that you made that you would like to tell everybody else not to do because you paid the consequences and you want to save everyone else from paying that consequence?
Not killing it quick enough in the spring. Sometimes when you get a dry year, 2023, we let some stuff grow bigger than I should have. My dad was after me to get it sprayed and I didn't. And yeah, I think we all kind of learned. Maybe me slower than the rest, but if you're afraid of a dry year, I'd kill some of them cover crops earlier if you're planting corn.
Yeah, we experienced something like that as well, Ron, on rye ahead of soybeans. That was not great. Mine's regarding grazing alfalfa is actually just this past year. We had 80 head on 5-acre paddocks for 48 hours last year. This year we had 150 head on the same 80 5-acre paddocks for 24 hours. That alfalfa didn't have enough time to regrow back to the reproductive state. By the time we'd gotten all the way around, it only had 16 days opposed to 32 days the year before. It was a hot day, 96. The cattle were all laying down. They weren't an excitement to move. And I said, just let them be. They'll come across on their own. That night, we got a bunch of rain. All the grass had started to seed out. So it wasn't near as palatable as the alfalfa. They came across in the middle of the night when it was raining. We walked out there that morning and there was 12 dead animals from bloat. That was by far the hardest point in the last 8 years. We've had 300 head of cattle altogether over the last 8 years. We've lost 23 animals total. 16 of them had been in the last 45 days. And it was just that I think I can accustom it to that second time we were coming around, that alfalfa wasn't far enough along. You know, we had 2 groups. The 2-year-old group, the older group, had dry hay. We run a bunch of bloat guard blocks out. They'd been on alfalfa. You know, we had done everything that we thought we could possibly do. But that day when we found those animals dead, we pulled them all off immediately. We don't graze alfalfa now unless there's a flower on it. And we also don't graze alfalfa unless there's dry hay out there. Is it overkill? Probably. Is it expensive to graze alfalfa and grass that we've taken out of row crop production and feed dry hay at the same time? Yeah. It's not as expensive as losing 12 animals, though. They don't utilize the pasture as well as I'd like them to. But anything we can possibly do to avoid a loss like that again is something that we will do. So we keep dry hay in with the pastures and we don't graze anything that isn't flowering.